Hey, welcome to the Curious Native Podcast. I'm your host, Huna Smakatien, and in today's episode of the podcast, we will be talking about the appropriation of Native American cultures by hippies and the damage this does to Native communities. So, if you're interested in that, keep on listening. But before I go into the episode, I wanted to apologize about any sounds you hear in the background. I am not in my normal space. I'm not in my room. I am in somebody's tattoo studio right now, so the sounds are a bit different. There's a lot more echo, and I did want to first and foremost apologize for any background noises that are happening outside. I can't really control what happens outside of the room. So I just wanted to, get that out of the way. And also, my last episode on Satching Littlefeather, just wanted to address this for a second because I did get some nasty messages on Twitter. Personally, these messages were quite mild from, compared to any other forms of hate I've gotten in the past, especially for my White Sage episode. I was literally getting death threats for my episode on the appropriation and exploitation of white sage by non-native people. And it was like, wow, I'm talking about a herb and, maybe why you should use another herb instead of using this herb that is, being taken from and stolen from native communities. And it's like, wow, screw you, you should go die. It's like, holy crap, dude, take a seat and chill out, because that is honestly a lot. But I do want to say that these type of things are not going to deter me from talking about this. So regardless of your feelings or how you feel about what I'm saying, I'm going to continue to talk about what I want to talk about and what I find important. And the things I talk about, I find important. So I think we could get into the episode now. And, let's just start with the basics. For those who do not know, hippies are people who are part of a countercultural movements. So specifically, you know, it's a movement that rejects the mores of mainstream American life and values. The movement really got its start in the 60s and 70s, like during the Vietnam War and the protests that surrounds that, because, well, if they're against, a lot of American values and, American lifestyles, one of those values would probably be, war. The United States is infatuated by war and the military industrial complex, so I can't fault hippies for that. This episode is not going to be me entirely shitting on hippies. That's a good thing. They should have been protesting the Vietnam War. Innocent people were dying, being burned alive by napalm bombs and shit. So, quite frankly, I have no sympathy for anybody who is pro Vietnam War and who agrees with that war. So I'm just gonna make that clear right now how I feel about that. But it wasn't until an event in San Francisco in 1967 called the Human Bee Inn, which was a protest against the banning of the drug LSD, which is, in my opinion, was one of the reasons why the stereotype of hippie and drugs, that whole thing comes from. But that whole protest and that movement is what really brought a lot of attention to the movements and to mainstream media in America. This is going to be a kind of a choppy transition, but I kind of want to talk about, some of the reasoning why hippies say they, in all seriousness, it's appropriation. They appropriate other cultures, but to them, I don't even believe they truly believe this. Is just their excuse, in my opinion. Maybe there's some who truly believe this, but their reasoning for why they take from other cultures. Since the movement and the members were so against the mainstream lifestyle and culture surrounding American culture, they would try their hardest to deny that lifestyle by appropriating clothing and spiritual and cultural practices, usually Native American cultures. The reasoning, which is why I said I was going to get into, is because they were looking for a alternate, quote unquote natural lifestyle that mainstream America, quote unquote, ignored. Which, can we talk about, that whole thing about Native Americans being natural and being one with the earth and that whole stereotype? I touched on that lightly, I believe, maybe in my Pocahontas episode. No, I think it might have been in my John Redcorn episode, to be 100% honest. The stereotype of the native man, and, the idea of, the flute playing in the background and the winds and the colors and all that bullshit. I 100% think that this is what they are not taking, they're taking a stereotype of what they think Native American culture is. And that's why it seems so offensive and honestly so racist, and like it's like a minstrel freaking show for it's like, I just don't understand. I just can't put it to words how ignorant hippies look and sound when they take and wear the appropriated culture and clothing and practices from native communities. It's just disgusting. This appropriation, it takes shape in many different forms, from clothing, spiritual practices, to food, to cultural beliefs. So, for example, the use of white sage by white spiritual practitioners and occultists, or dream catchers being made and sold by non-natives, or war bonnets being worn by non-natives at music festivals, or, as a costume during Halloween. There was a big controversy for I don't know if you would consider her a porn star or an actress. Maybe both. Pamela Anderson, she was wearing a war bonnet for Halloween and was just completely naked, which is disgusting. Let's just be real. That is completely unacceptable on all levels. That is what I'm speaking on. And I 100% believe that this is connected to like Native American mascots and racist and offensive and stereotypical portrayals of indigenous people in film and TV, which, I've talked about, like I said, on the John Redcorn episode. So if you want to go ahead and even on the Indian burial ground episode, I talked about that, which I also think this plays into that. It's the portrayal that, people love to keep bringing up about natives, and they love to keep portraying us as these like dirty savages. Like, I don't understand. Like, why would they want to keep us in that portrayal? We've been so vocally open about the fact that we are against, that portrayal of the savage, and especially when it comes to people in red face and dressing up as Native Americans and using our resources for, I'm going to keep it real, for bullcrap. It's bullshit. So why is this an issue? Why is it an issue that non-natives are appropriating cultures from native communities? And when I say people, I mean hippies and white spiritual practitioners and new age spiritualists, which I do believe a lot of new age spiritualists are just hippies wrapped up in this, paganized Christianity. I don't understand how to put it, but the way they be talking about ascension and, bad vibes, or I don't remember the exact terminology, because I usually block those people and try to actively avoid those type of people, because I just don't think that, I don't personally believe that behavior is acceptable at all. So to get back to the question, so why is this an issue? Well, for starters, it denies cultural respect to native communities where these cultures come from. Not to harp on back to white sage, because I keep bringing it up, but this is all connected. It is. It's all connected. And if you're not going to acknowledge that, then maybe don't talk about indigenous issues, and maybe you should go try to find something else to, talk about or to look up. But, when you take white sage or you buy it at a store, you're not thinking about where that white sage comes from, or, a lot of the times white sage is poached from native lands and then sold to stores. That's how that works. Especially if you're going to, like, there's plenty of what are they called? Like old school drugstores, especially here in the Tower District here in Fresno, California. You'll find drugstores or little witch shops that sell white sage, and usually they're buying it from private suppliers. And it's like, well, where are those private suppliers getting them from? And even if they are buying it from corporations, that's also an ethical. There's something unethical about that for so many reasons. Secondly, it degrades and makes a mockery of these cultural practices, and it also, it's also like a slap in the face to the native communities who for hundreds of years weren't allowed to participate in their cultural practices, wear, their cultural gowns and regalia, and, to even wear the war bonnets at all. Like, they weren't allowed to even do any of that because it was, my ancestors weren't allowed to practice our cultural practices and our freaking, everything that made our ancestors, they were not allowed to do that. So, and it wasn't even until, I believe, like, was it the 70s or 80s? Even, I can't remember the exact date that they, it was legal for Native Americans to practice our cultures again. But, that is, there is a form, it's offensive, and it's a slap in the face to Native communities who for hundreds of years weren't allowed to participate in their cultural practices because of colonialism and colonization. Lastly, it leaves Native communities without, especially when it comes down to herbs and plants and cultural foods. This is, I kind of touched on a minute ago about like white sage and, or even Palo Santo. There's a big thing with Palo Santo, which I wish I had brought up in my white sage episode, and I didn't. So I'm going to bring it up here now. When you buy Palo Santo from the store, you see it, it's usually this really pretty orange color that, especially if you go to like a witch shop, very much orange, and it's just, smells like new wood. Well, for one, that's not how that works. The idea, when you burn Palo Santo, it brings you wisdom, okay? But the idea of why it brings you wisdom is because the tree's old and dead when you harvest from it. That tree is old, dead, and rotting. You are cutting pieces of wood out of it so you could burn it so it could bring you wisdom. When you go to the stores, these witchcraft shops, any type of shop where you could buy Palo Santo or white sage, usually the Palo Santo is going to be new wood from a baby tree. You're literally burning a baby. Like, are you not thinking about that fact? Like, you're burning a actual infant baby. It may be a tree, but it is a baby. You're burning a baby tree. You are taking resources from Native communities. I wonder how many, I wish I could actually have the statistics up and like some type of, graphics that could tell me about, how many Native communities are without, and, without specifically for, I wonder how many indigenous communities in North America, burn Palo Santo, but, as like a cultural and ancestral practice, but don't have, they don't have access to Palo Santo because of the exploitation and appropriation of, the tree. And I just don't understand. Native cultures are constantly being appropriated by non-natives from all American subcultures, so it being taken and appropriated by, the hippie movement isn't surprising at all. Growing up, I remember thinking how offensive it was, especially like you see dream catchers, like I mentioned earlier, you go to a store and you could buy a dream catcher that's made out of a metal ring and, like some fucking, I don't know what, floss or some kind of string, I don't know. But it's like, that's not how it was made originally. That's not, I believe, I wish I had my computer. I do not have my computer because, like I said, I am not in my space at the moment. I am in a tattoo studio. But, I can't remember which tribe the dream catchers come from. I could be wrong, but I do believe they come from maybe the Navajo people. But like I said, it is originally made out of a wood. It's made out of a stick. the ring's supposed to be made out of a stick because it's circle of life, I believe. It's a full circle. There's like reasons it's made out of certain things, and the shape that it's in is because it represents things. And even then, I could be wrong, but I believe like twined spider webs maybe would have been traditionally used for a dream catcher. Like I said, I could be wrong, but I know for a fact that it ain't no polyester strings being used and metal rings and chicken feathers. Something tells me that there's something morally and there's something unacceptably wrong about that. I can't sit here and cap. There is something wrong with that. Just growing up, I remember that, thinking about, even growing up, seeing, like growing up in school and having, learning about American history. I learned a little bit about, the 60s, 70s, and the hippies were part of that. And, I kind of had a cool teacher who, taught us about things that, it was part of the curriculum, but it was always going a little bit further and maybe teaching us a little bit extra. And I remember, seeing pictures of Burning Man and people in war bonnets and dressed up like Native Americans and people in red face. And it's like, holy shit, dude. Like, chill the fuck out. Holy fucking crap. Like, stop the casual anti-indigenous, behavior and rhetoric. And, if you believe you're going to be one with the earth and you're going to do better than, this colonial America lifestyle has to offer, and you're just trying to be a better person, very much, what is the word I'm looking for? I don't know, like a very much grounded individual. That's fine, good and all, but don't sit here practicing casual racism, because that's exactly what it is, racism, and then trying to act like, you're making the world a better place, because you most absolutely are not making the world a better place for Native communities in North America. And, I was specifically speaking about, Native American cultures being appropriated, but like I mentioned in my Satching Littlefeather episode, Native American, Mexican, Indigenous, Native Mexican, or, like the First People of Canada, to me, all these borders and, adding American, Canadian, or Mexican at the end, that shit does not matter to me. We're all Native at the end of the day because we're all from the same freaking continent. We're all from the same landmass. And if you're a hippie, and I know a lot of hippies don't necessarily, they don't call themselves hippies, but if you know what you fall under, what umbrella you fall under, please do better for indigenous people here in North America, not only here in North America, all over the world, and especially African cultures. I didn't even talk about that part, really. The appropriation of African cultures, people wearing these, I forget what exactly they're called, but, like those neck rings that make your neck appear longer. And I've seen those being appropriated by hippies. Them wearing that, them wearing, I think they're called Crowley shells, in their hair, them wearing dreadlocks, which, fun fact, during my research, like I said, I didn't touch on, the appropriation of, indigenous cultures from Africa much, but it did come up in my research, and a lot of the things that I seen was, specifically relating to hair, and something I learned. When white people have, their hair done like that, that's called dreads, and when black people have it in, it's called locks. And that's a cultural aspect that I had never, I barely learned today, or actually, yeah, it would have been today because I stood up really late last night doing this research and stuff for the episode. So, learning about that aspect of it all, that was interesting, because not only was I learning about, shit that affects indigenous people here in, the continent of North America, but I was also learning about things that affect other indigenous people from other continents, and, the right and correct and appropriate language to use when talking about them. So that was something that, if you're going to do research about these type of things, it's all great information to have, especially if it's coming up in your research. Yeah. For now, I think that's really all I have. I do maybe want to do a spiritual sequel in the future. I did want to do an episode in the future about occultists and spiritual practitioners appropriating closed practices. That's something that I've always been interested in since I am a practicing occultist for the last 4 to 5 years, I believe now. I think it's going on 5 years now, but it's, I want to talk about that because, like I said, it is connected to this. It's all connected. At the end of the day, any form of, anti-indigenous racism that occurs here in North America, it is all connected at the end of the day in the core, and down deep in the core, it's all connected. And that connection is colonization and colonialism. So, I'm going to continue to talk about these things and to continue making episodes about these things regardless if it's about natives in film, natives in TV, or, the appropriation of indigenous cultures, or whether or not I'm talking about the life of indigenous activists. Like I have another episode in the future coming out about a certain, very, very famous Hawaiian activist. I don't even have to say her name. Y'all already know who I'm talking about. So I teased that on Twitter too. So if you're not following me already on Twitter, go do that. Because I'm always, having updates about what's going on the podcast. There's also the official official podcast Twitter page at TCN Pod, capital TCNP, lowercase OD. My Twitter is at Huskasmin, lowercase HUSKA, uppercase M, lowercase MIN, uppercase T, lowercase HINE. That was a lot. I know it was a lot because it was a lot for me to say, okay? I even got mixed up talking about it. Before I go, I do want to say thank you so much for a lot of the support that I get. I don't get many comments here on YouTube, but I do get a lot of Twitter messages. Like, the fact that I get any messages at all is freaking crazy. A lot of people especially I've noticed amongst indigenous people, there are a couple of white allies who have messaged me telling me they really like my podcast and I hope I keep up the good work. But, it means a lot more. Not saying that doesn't mean a lot to me. Any support means a lot to me, but it does mean there's something certainly special about indigenous people supporting indigenous people. So that whole aspect of it has really been, quite amazing and quite nice. And I'm going to be, forever thankful for the platform that I have. I have, slowly built up this platform. I had another Instagram under the name Hunasmakatian, that's my pen name. I go under the pen name Hunasmakatian. My Twitter name is Huskasmin, which they mean they mean the exact same thing. Hunasmak and Huskasmin mean the same thing. It means healer. And Atian means man. So, my other platform, I was very vocal on it. I was building up quite a following. And that was how I was able to even get where I'm at today. Even have, the fact that I have 14 subscribers that's crazy to me, So when I get to 20 subscribers, that will be insane to me. When I get to 30 subscribers, that's going to be insane to me, I am so thankful for the fact that I'm able to even sit here and record a podcast episode, That's insane to me. I am planning on having guests too. I do want to say that I'm in the works of having, fellow Native people on the podcast to talk. I want to have Jewish people on the podcast. Someone that talks with a few different Jewish people, that I am mutuals with and friends with on Twitter. A lot of Twitter is very much responsible for everything. I know it's been a shit show since Elon Musk took over, but for the most part, I was there before Elon even thought about buying it, so I know what Twitter can do and how much it can build people up and how much it can really change people's lives. So it's really done that for me and for my platform. So that's really it for today's episode. If you liked it, please go ahead and subscribe, like, and share the video. And comment, please. Comment. Go ahead and follow me on Twitter at Huskasmin, like I said. And the official podcast Twitter page at TCN Pod. Keep a lookout for the next episode that will be coming out in the next couple of days. So, that will be out there, and that's going to be a good episode, like I was kind of teasing already. If you enjoyed, I'm glad. I'm glad you enjoyed. And I will see you in the next episode. Bye bye.